Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Hello, folks. So we are, on this episode, going to actually kind of actualize our very title, because the people we're going to be talking about are indeed from Akron, and they went beyond. Nick and I were talking a few weeks ago, just about...
what an idea for the show.
Yeah, we were kind of brainstorming various ideas, and one thing that occurred to us is some of the people, musicians, that are from Akron that you may not know were from Akron. In fact, some of these names might be even a little unknown to you or vague to you, but they all really had pretty significant careers, and the more we looked into it, the more fascinating we found them.
Brad, what was the term you used?
The unsung heroes of Akron.
That's right.
So these are the unsung heroes of Akron music, and there's probably more out there. Quite a few more, actually. But these are a few names of note that we found particularly interesting. So we're going to, on this show, basically be talking about these folks, hopefully introducing you to some of them, or perhaps reminding you of some of them. And we're going to be playing a lot of music in this as well. So hope you enjoy it. And Nick, you get to start. Who do you got?
I got Bob Newworth. He was Bob Dylan's road manager on that his first English tour, and he appears quite a bit in that. The
movie Don't Look Back.
Yeah, by Pennebaker.
D.A. Pennebaker, yes.
But it was interesting, how you watch, not to make that much fun of it, but when you see previews of TV shows where they warn you about what might be offensive, like smoking and drinking and certain things. Man, I never saw so much smoke in my life as what, all Bob Dylan, Joan Baez ate a little bit of fruit in that movie, here and there, but Dylan and Newworth, man, that's all they did was smoke, It was almost like one of those old Italian movies,
or film noirs.
Yeah.
Robert Mitchum or whatever, yeah.
But anyway, he was born in Akron in 1939. He just recently passed away a couple years ago, but he was an artist and a musician. He played a harmonica, banjo, guitar, and besides, he was like a hangers-on kind of guy. He hung out with all these famous people in the early 60s in the village.
Yeah, and into the 70s. He was sort of the ultimate scenester, I think you would say. And I have to mention real quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to mention that when you watch Don't Look Back, that great documentary, it's truly one of those films, like you're watching it and it's like, well, this is when Bob Dylan was the coolest guy on the planet, right? I mean, he was so cool and so, just had the world on his fingertips, and Bob Newworth is right there with him.
And they're almost every scene.
And you can tell that they're buddies. They're laughing. They're together all the time. And so he kind of probably glommed off Dylan a little bit, but at the same time, he was offering something up that Dylan valued, so it was worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And he had several albums that he did. I happen to own two of them. One was he did with John Cale, believe it or not. The European force, of the Velvet Underground. I mean, it was just it was a cool album. It was called Last Day on Earth. It came out in 1994, and he's had like 5 solo albums himself. I also I owned Havana Midnight, where he did. It was sort of like folk jazz by Cuban musicians. It's a pretty cool album.
I was interested to read that his first solo album came out in the early 1970s. I think about 1973, 1974, and this is just sort of an indication of the kind of people that he was friends with, right? Because, I mean, on that album, Chris Christopherson, Booker T. Jones, Rita Coolidge, Chris Hillman, Cass Elliot, Dusty Springfield, Don Everly. I mean, these are just, people from this wide range of music that obviously he was friends with, that he had on his album. And that album oddly enough, it didn't really
He said he
sell.
didn't really want to promote it. He didn't.
Right. Yeah, apparently he didn't. And it's out of print now. It'd be nice for that to get re-released by some label. I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, he even introduced Chris Christopherson to Janis Joplin. And, she did that. What was it, one song?
Me and Bobby McGee.
Me and Bobby McGee, and he even co-wrote, he's had this little drunken party one night, and he scribbled down some words on a napkin, and that turned into Mercedes-Benz.
Right.
Him and Michael McClure and Janis, they claim, co-wrote that song, And she passed away 3 days after they recorded it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the album Pearl, which was her final record, came out after her death, and was a huge seller for her, which was sad.
Yeah. But Bob actually lived in Akron up until he went to college. He went to OU. And then he went to New England for a while, and then settled in the Village. It was so he had a heck of a career, but and he's not remembered as being from Akron.
Well, that was the thing. I knew who he was because, as I believe has come up on the show before, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, so I knew him via that connection.
Yeah,
and I knew that he had also introduced. The legendary, infamous Edie Sedgwick to Bob Dylan, and apparently was trying to get them to be in a movie together.
Absolutely.
But she, of course, passed away before that could happen. But so I always knew who he was, but then at some point I realized he's from Akron, and I thought, well, I had no idea. And I'd ask around, and there's a couple of people a few years older than me that actually knew him here in Akron, but not that many, and it's I guess once he left, he made his mark. But very interesting guy, artist, musician, writer, all kinds of things. Yeah,
scene master.
Yeah, painter. Yeah, right. So that's Bob Newworth. So we're going to move on. We're doing this semi-chronologically until we get to the end, in which we're completely going back in time, and we're going to bring Brett in on that one, but because he's the expert on that fellow. But keep listening. That was a teaser, folks. This is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with co-host Nick Nicholas. And Nick, who do you have next for us?
Who would have thought that two members of Alice Cooper Akronites?
The original band.
The original band. Mm-hmm. Neil Smith and Glenn Buxton.
Wow, I guess I'd heard that, but I'd forgotten it.
Yeah, Neil Smith, the drummer, and Glenn Buxton, the guitarist. And Glenn passed away a few years, rather young. It's been a while.
Yeah,
Neil's still going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and there's a great article in the Beacon Journal by a local writer, Mark Price, that gave us a lot of information a couple years ago on the relationship with Neil and Akron.
Yeah. Alice Cooper, if I may interject for a moment, Alice Cooper is one of those artists, kind of like Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath. It's just funny because now we look at them like sort of benign, funny fellows who, you wouldn't mind hanging out with your family with, right? Whereas
he plays a lot of golf.
Whereas early in their career, they were scary. They were dangerous. Yeah. And Alice Cooper, of course, I mean, there's the singer, Alice Cooper, but that was the name of the band originally. And they were originally signed to Frank Zappa's label, right?
Yeah.
Straight Records, I think?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And they made a couple albums for them, and neither one really sold. But they were good.
Yeah, Pretty's.
Tell me about Pretty's for You, because you know that one better.
It's a great album. Fields of Regret, Reflected, and then the follow-up, Easy Action with Mr. Misdemeanor. And then, the third album, which actually they had a hit single with I'm 18.
That's Love It to Death.
Yeah.
That was kind of when they took off.
Yeah. They played larger. I remember seeing them quite a few times around Akron, and late 60s, early 70s. One of the best shows was when they played it was a old ballroom from probably the 20s or 30s that they started having shows in above the old cove that burnt down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I saw them there, and then the band was out there in the alley, like talking to all the people. It was just like real. I mean, that's what Alice Cooper was the idea. I remember during one of their songs, someone brought out a 15-foot step ladder and just set it on stage, and Alice, climbed up and was singing, "Nobody likes me." I mean, those are the days when, DIY art rock.
Yeah, well, I've told you this story before. That Alice Cooper, of course, they were out west and they were trying to make it, and those first two albums really didn't do anything. And then they moved to Detroit, actually, because at that time Detroit had this, really happening scene with
MC5, Stooges,
right, all those bands, Amboy Dukes, Bob Seger System, and so they kind of went to try to kind of pretend that they were from Detroit and played around there a lot. And I was just in.
Oh, you lived there? You were a kid then?
Yeah, I saw them when I was like in 9th grade. Yeah. They played this school function, believe it or not. Obviously, the parents who arranged this show had no idea what they were doing.
Oh, who's this lovely Alice?
Yeah, yes, warping our young minds. But it's funny because I remember from the Love It to Death album that they did the song Black Juju.
Yeah, I remember that.
And in that song, all the lights went down. Yeah. And Alice is crawling around on the floor of the stage with this big flashlight under his chin, just like what Grandpa would do, at the campfire, like, I'm going to tell you a scary story, kids. Yeah. But I have to say, Alice did scare me. He was creepy. He had that makeup on and stuff. It was spooky.
I remember Black Juju. That was one of their big showstopper,
Right. It was like, long, 9-minute song or whatever. Yeah.
But
they did Killer after that.
Yeah.
And then $1 Billion Babies, and then Muscle of Love. And then that is when the band Alice Cooper broke up, and then he kind of went solo.
He got the guys from the hot guitarists from Detroit.
Was Dick Wagner in that? Yeah. Now, did these guys stay with him in those bands? I don't really know. I don't think so.
Well, there was and I stopped listening to Alice. I hate to say this, probably about 20 years ago, but at one point the band came back. Glenn Buxton was deceased, but he brought the original members back, and some of the documentaries that recent ones they're in there.
Oh, okay, cool.
But anyway, back to Akron roots. When Neil's parents got divorced. He was from Medina, but his parents got divorced, and at a really young age he moved to Akron. He lived on Hardesty Boulevard, and he was entrenched here in Akron. He was a Boy Scout. He went to Camp Manitowoc. He talks about Camp Manitowoc, but interestingly enough, my daughter got me an art piece, musical art piece by Mark Mothersbaugh that I have framed, and the title of it is Camp Manitowoc. Was both wonderful and terrifying. So
there's a story behind that, obviously.
And he moved to Neil moved to Phoenix when he was 15, and Glenn Buxton grew up on Davies Avenue. He went to David Hill and Roswell Kent Junior Highs. So they were Akron until they went to Arizona, as young kids, and they went to high school together.
Yeah, I think Arizona, now that you mention it, I said that they were from out west. They were from Arizona. I think that's where...
Oh, they all moved. I mean, I think Alice...
was from there.
Yeah. But the other two guys were Akron transplants to there.
Yeah. And I would say, as a special recommendation from Akron and Beyond, that if you like Alice Cooper and you've never heard their second album, Easy Action, that's really
great,
a great record. And
that's great.
I think a lot of people haven't heard it, but there's some great... In Return of the Spiders on that? I think so, yeah. And that's a cool song.
Refrigerator Heaven.
Yeah,
I like
that on there too. Right. So we're going to move on now to another figure that I find particularly fascinating. He's in his own way one of the most innovative guitar players in the world of rock. And he played on a lot of interesting and memorable and important albums. And that guy is Robert Quine.
He was always like a side man, but man, what a talent.
That's right, yes. And there's a famous quote from Mr. Happy, Lou Reed, where he was asked once, why did Lou not think that Robert Quine had become more famous because he was such a fantastic guitar player? And Lou said, because he's bald.
Oh,
that was his answer.
I'm glad I lost my hair later on.
It's true that Robert Quine was quite bald, but he was also a quite amazing guitarist. And he's from Akron. He's also part of a interesting family of very significant people. He's related to a guy named Willard Van Orman Quine, who was one of the most important and influential 20th century philosophers and logicians.
What's a logician?
Somebody who thinks logically, unlike you, Nick.
Okay. Oh, that's got it.
You don't have to worry about it. But when I lived on for years, I lived on Mall Avenue in near Highland Square area, and actually the street right behind Mall is where Quine grew up, and he wrote a autobiography, which you can get at the Akron libraries. Have it.
Plug in the library.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know if this book's still in print. If it was, it would be real expensive because it was a university press book. But it was just interesting because, I mean, that old neighborhood is actually where he grew up. But anyway, there's him, and then of course on the other side of the genealogical tree is Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys, also a great guitar player. And he was related to Robert as well.
Cousins,
I believe. Yeah. So Robert Quine was one of these people who it was just fascinating in that he seemed to have dozens of different talents and different things that he could have pursued in life. But he was a restless soul, I guess you'd say. He actually went to St. Louis when he graduated from high school, and he went to college, and then he studied law, and he got a law degree.
No.
But he never bothered to pass his bar exam. He tried it a couple times and didn't pass, and he just kind of gave up on it. But he had a law degree.
Well, I didn't know that.
And then early on, he ended up moving to New York, and he made some of the earliest recordings of the Velvet Underground.
Oh, yeah, man. It's out of print now, the Quine tapes.
Yeah.
A great record.
Which you can probably still find, I mean, online if you want it. But it's, they're rough. They're not great recordings, but they are very important because he really caught the band at a great time in their career.
They were happy.
And Quine, of course, was blown away by the Velvet Underground. I keep waiting for the musician of great note who says, never liked Velvet Underground. I've yet to meet this person. Seems like everyone loved the Velvet Underground, right?
Right.
But anyway, he loved them, and he was very influenced by the way that they played.
Wasn't that at Max's Kansas City where that was recorded? I think it was.
I believe it was. Yes, I think you're right. And then he went on from that, moved to San Francisco, and he kind of just listened to a lot of music and played a lot of guitar in various jam sessions, what have you. And interestingly, he was obsessed with a couple of Miles Davis albums that just happened to be a couple of my favorites. One of them is On the Corner, and the other one is Get Up With It. And he always claimed that he introduced the song He Loved Her Madly off of Get Up With It by Miles Davis to Brian Eno, who later cites that particular song as a big influence on his ambient music. And if you've ever heard that song, you can believe it because it's very moody and quiet, 32 minutes long. And you have to be in the right mood, but it's actually a beautiful, amazing piece of music by Miles. And On the Corner, of course, is a great album. And Robert Quine became obsessed with the guitar sound on that record, and he tried to emulate it.
And when I first became aware of him was when he was with Richard Hell.
Right, and that was it. He went and, of course, Richard Hell and Tom Verlaine started television, and then Richard left television and started his own band, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and he got Robert Quine to be the guitar player. And you'll be hearing a few songs from that band because his guitar work on that is just incendiary.
Amazing.
It's crazy, and and it kind of belies like the whole idea of punk rock as being simplistic music, because you listen to that Richard Hell and the Voidoids, those songs are pretty crazy rhythmically and in terms of the chops that like Robert Quine brought to it. So great stuff. And he went on from there. He played with a lot of different people over the years. He played very memorably with Lou Reed, speaking of Lou, and made a couple albums with him. Probably the best one is The Blue Mask. And his playing on that,
oh, man,
it will almost blow you out of your chair, won't it, Nick?
Yeah,
you know that album.
Yeah, it's a great album.
Yeah, and it's one of Lou Reed's very best albums. I highly recommend it. And his guitar work on that is nuts. And then he also played on the great album by Matthew Sweet, two of his albums, actually, Altered Beast, but also the album Girlfriend.
Yeah.
And his guitar solo on Girlfriend is amazing.
That's more of a traditional type of a solo on that than a lot of the stuff he's known for, but it's great.
Yeah, and it brought kind of a little harder edge to a song that was really popish.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave it that extra something, that made that song so memorable. He would go on to play with all kinds of different people, Lloyd Cole and John Zorn.
Really?
And he made a number of albums with John Zorn. And he's on Tom Waits' Rain Dogs album. And there's a sweet little guitar solo at the end of the great tune Downtown Train. And that's Keith Richards is playing the rhythm guitar on that, really? But Robert plays the lead.
Was that an album that Ralph was on?
Ralph Carney is on Rain Dogs.
Yeah,
yes.
2 Akron guys.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. And we're going to do a special episode on Ralph down the road at some point for sure.
But you also mentioned a great live album that he was on with Lou Reed. What was that?
Live in Italy.
Yeah. I don't have that. I like it.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. But Robert Quine, he was always had sort of drug issues and stuff, which probably didn't help him in his career. And ultimately, he passed away back in 2004, and his wife had passed away before him, and apparently, like
a year to the day,
of her passing, he died of a drug overdose, and it's considered to be on purpose that happened. Yeah. But boy, his guitar playing and his the various albums that he played on. He was on a They May Be Giants album.
No,
They May Be Giants, yeah. I mean, you never know where this guy was going to show up. It's pretty crazy.
Well, he was in demand because he was so good.
Right, exactly. There may be giants. There might be giants.
They may be. That's the splitter group. They may be giants. Or what it was before they were giants.
Yeah, right. Well, this is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington. I'm here with my co-host, Nick Nicholas. We're talking about unsung heroes of Akron rock music.
And we're playing a lot of music.
So I hope you enjoyed it. And we're now going to get rid of the rock part and just go back to music in general with a guy who had many hit songs and who actually we're bringing our buddy and producer Brad Savage is on this because with his Cruising Through the Decades show, he really is an expert on this guy. So Brad, tell us about Vaughn Monroe.
Vaughn Monroe, yes. Yeah, well, I didn't even realize until after I had moved here that his history goes back to Akron, Ohio in the late 30s and early 40s. Now, he's one of the biggest hit makers and chart successes of the 1940s. Yeah. I mean, well over 20 hits that were in the top 20 or top 10 on the charts. You know, the Golden Melodies era, or like the classic jukebox era. You know who else I really bonded over? Our previous guest, Calvin Ridebaum. Calvin happens to be a big fan of Vaughn Monroe as well. So, you know, because I think there's so much great music history in Akron, and we talk about the rock and roll era and everything, but going back even further, and I should just throw in a mention in the R&B and the jazz era. You've got people like Tiny Bradshaw, who is from Youngstown, and Bull Moose Jackson from Cleveland, you know, so a lot of this era is represented, and I've become a super fan of the pre-rock and roll era through the Cruise in the Decades show. So now, one thing I did learn, I have to seek out like a biography about Vaughn Monroe and really get his more detailed story, because I know he also spent some time growing up in central Pennsylvania. I don't know exactly which city, but at any rate, you know, he was born and raised in Akron, and we certainly consider him an Akronite.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as as far as music history in our area.
I was interested to see some of the people that played in his band. These are names that might be a tad obscure to some, but they shouldn't be. Bucky Pizzarelli, who's a great jazz guitarist, played with Vaughn Monroe's band. And believe it or not, Ray Conniff.
No!
Who would later be famous for the Ray Conniff Singers, right? The epitome of sort of
like the easy listening like 50s era.
Back to those Goodyear Christmas albums.
Yes.
Yes, he's always on one of those.
Yep.
And he played trombone with Vaughn Monroe's band. So, yeah, and Don Costa did some of the arrangements for Vaughn Monroe, and he worked, for many years making big band arrangements and movie soundtrack arrangements. So, but Vaughn Monroe, he seems it's funny because he was really popular. I mean, he was on a lot of television shows and radio shows and so early.
A lot of those singers did variety shows, and became hosts. And and I'm just looking into the 40s. He had songs like "There I Go," "Goodbye Now," "Tangerine," "When the Lights Go On Again." We're not even at 1945.
Right.
We get "Rum and Coca-Cola." "There I've Said It Again" was one of the big ones. Really? "Seems Like Old Times." I mean, songs that you recognize just by title in the great songbook.
Now, did he write Ghost Riders in the Sky?
I don't think he wrote it, but he had the earliest hit version of it.
It's like 1949.
I think that's 49. Yeah, even into the 50s here, he was still quite a chart success. Yeah, Riders in the Sky, Cowboy Legend was a number one. Written in 1948 by songwriter, film, and TV actor Stan Jones. Stan Jones wrote it. But I knew that song because of Johnny Cash.
Me too.
Before I found the Vaughn Monroe version.
Yeah. Right. And I'm looking here, I mean, this is not stuff I knew off the top of my head. I did a little research on these people, but I'm seeing that he had his own show on CBS television for a few years in the early 50s, the Vaughn Monroe Show.
Yes.
And then he appeared as a guest on Bonanza.
No.
And the Jackie Gleason Show, Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So, an American Bandstand.
Yeah. Wow. The early years for Bandstand, I would think.
I would think so, yeah. And he has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. How about that? Yeah. So, and it appears that there is a town, Jeanette, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And that's where he lived and went to high school.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And met his wife there, and they stayed married the whole time. So, yeah. Nice story.
What a voice, too. Like, we'll do a Vaughn Monroe Jubilee here. We'll do a nice rock block of Vaughn Monroe songs.
Yeah, the rest of this program this time was Brad's going to get his Vaughn Monroe going here. Yeah.
That's right.
Great show today, you know. I mean, just
well, again, it's we're lucky. There's a lot of people that have gone on to fame and fortune from Akron, and and we all know Chrissy Hind. We all know, Devo, Mark Mothersbaugh,
and the Black Keys, for instance.
The Black Keys, right? Dan Auerbach, previously mentioned, and
James
of course,
Ingram.
Patrick Carney and James Ingram. And I mean, we know these names, but it was interesting to kind of I think this was inspired really by us just at one time, quite a while ago, somehow Bob Newirth's name came up and I just said did you know he was from Akron? And then it was no, and it was I wonder who else, kind of came from here that we didn't realize. And doing a little looking.
There's probably a lot more.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
We could probably have a part 2 to this episode. But anyway, this has been fun, and I hope that you all out there have enjoyed it, and that you enjoy the music that will be has been playing throughout the show.
Especially the Vaughn Monroe Mega Block.
See y'all next week.
Okay, yes, thanks. This has been From Akron and Beyond. We'll see you next time.